Well, that's good. Yeah. Some things are not going to change. Oh. And it turns out that he and Matt both played basketball at the same place. So they've got that in common.
They let me play with them.
Did they?
I played basketball too.
Air ball, bowling ball. You can roll right under him, huh? Oh. Oh. Amy, is there any public comments?
That's what Amy said.
I think it's time, man. Good afternoon. Welcome everyone to the Tuesday, March 23rd, 2021 regular meeting of the Belton City Council. Appreciate everyone being here. Tonight, the Pledge of Allegiance will be led by Councilmember Craig Pearson. The Pledge of Allegiance to the Texas flag will be led by the Director of Finance, Mike Rogers, and the invocation will be led by Councilmember David K. Lee.
Join me in the pledge to the American flag. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
The Texas pledge.
Honor the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state under God, one and indivisible.
So move prayer. Our most precious Heavenly Father, we just thank you for this spring. Thank you for renewal, and thank you for the memories of the last year. I would have to say that those are very unique. And we just celebrate coming out of this COVID situation. We just also look forward to getting back out and being amongst one another and having a better society because of it. And we just have really been saddened by the loss of life, by a lot of the anger that we see in and around the world. But we just thank you for this great community and great citizens. And we just pray that you'll give the wisdom to the leaders and allowing us to bear with one another. Just bless this evening. In your name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Call the meeting to order. Are there any public comments? Thank you. Item number 3 is proclamation denoting Fair Housing Month, and Director of Planning Bob Van Til, and I'll bring this down to you, sir. The Office of the Mayor, whereas the Fair Housing Act enacted on April 11, 1968, enshrined into federal law the goal of eliminating racial segregation and ending housing discrimination in the United States. And whereas the Fair Housing Act prohibits discrimination in housing based on race, color, religion, sex, familial status, national origin, and disability, and commits recipients of federal funding to affirmatively further fair housing in their communities. And whereas the City of Belton is committed to the mission and the intent of Congress to provide fair and equal housing opportunities for all. And whereas our social fabric, the economy, health, and environment are strengthened in diverse and inclusive communities. And whereas more than 50 years after the passage of the Fair Housing Act, discrimination persists and many communities remain segregated. And whereas acts of housing discrimination and barriers to equal housing opportunity are repugnant to common sense, decency, and fairness. Whereas the city of Belton is committed to highlight the Fair Housing Law, Title 8 of the Civil Rights Act of 1968, by continuing to address discrimination in our community, to support programs that will educate the public about the right to equal housing opportunities, and to plan partnership efforts with other organizations to help assure every American of their right to fair housing. And whereas the city of Belton is proud of the cooperative relationships it shares with the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, the U.S. Department of Agriculture, the Central Texas Housing Consortium, the Central Texas Council of Governments, the Temple Belton Board of Realtors, the Belton Area Chamber of Commerce, and the Temple Area Builders Association in actively promoting and encouraging fair housing. Now therefore, I, Wayne Carpenter, Mayor of the City of Belton, do hereby proclaim the month of April 2021 as Fair Housing Month in the City of Belton, and to recognize Belton as an inclusive community committed to fair housing and to promoting appropriate activities to provide and advocate for equal housing opportunities for all residents and prospective residents of Belton, Texas. In witness thereof, I have hereunto set my hand and have caused the official seal of the City of Belton, Texas, to be affixed this 23rd day of March, 2021. Signed by the mayor, attested by Amy Casey. Thank you.
Say a few words in reply. Mayor, thank you very much, council members. I really appreciate this very much. This proclamation is not only, good for Belton when it comes to applying for grants, but it's, Fair Housing Month also reminds us of the principle of fair housing is not only a state and national law, but, a fundamental human right for all people. In all communities, we should welcome all good neighbors, recognizing the contribution and richness generously offered by a wide variety of folks that live in our community, regardless of their diverse backgrounds, their color, ethnicity, or religious tradition. This proclamation also gives us the opportunity to let folks in our community know that our city helps our residences to resolve housing discrimination and complaints, and also complaints about substandard housing. And so if there's ever a complaint that comes to you or to us, just know that we are here to help them, and we can help process their concerns in accordance with the law, but also in accordance with our own desire to help people live in safe and decent housing. So again, thank you very much for the proclamation. I greatly appreciate it.
Thank you, Bob. And again, thank you to all the partners that were listed in that proclamation, because they make it possible to do what we need to do. So
Absolutely.
thanks for all the work.
Thank you.
Item number 4 is to receive an after-action report on the February 2021 winter storm. And Chief Fontenot is going to present that.
Mayor, Council, as you know, after a large incident like this, it's really a good idea to go back and review what went well, lessons learned, what we can do better the next time. This is a very quick summary of a very long AAR that the city completed with the help of every department head, city administration. We really dove in deep to see how we can mitigate these type of incidences. So as part of the AAR, we had to set some objectives, and those objectives were to look at the preparation steps, and then overview of the events, identify what went well when dealing with the events, and identify some department deficiencies, and answer the question, what lessons did we learn? So in preparation, all the departments were notified that the event was going to happen. So each department looked at their vehicles, equipment, facilities, and prepared those the best they knew how. Now, this storm was quite unusual, and knowing how to prepare for something like this was a lesson learned for sure. Departmental internal and external communication process were put in place, and notifications were published via social media, code red, of possible city closures. So the winter event lasted from the 11th through the 18th. We had below freezing, we had frozen rain, sleet, snow. As we can all remember, there were some power outages. Now the power outages were promoted before the event as rolling brownouts. Unfortunately, it went from that to a system failure, a generation system failure. So when we thought the electricity was going to come back on and noticed that it didn't, we started making phone calls. Encore was really helpful during the whole process. We had meetings with them every day, but they let us know that because of that generation failure, that we could expect long outages. So we started preparing for some of those. Some water outages. During the first 3 days of the temperature not reaching above freezing, we started getting reports of water outages. Now, the good news is we had one major water system failure, and that was on 6th Street, and the guys worked all night. Angela and her crew was out there in frozen water, below freezing weather, fixing that line. Did a great job. Most of the water outages that we saw throughout town was due to us needing to cut the valve off because they had water leakage inside their house or in their yard. There was no real major line issues on our end. We did set up some warming sites. We had 3 in town at the American Legion Hall, the middle school, and the North Belton Middle School. All were promoted as warming sites. Fortunately, we didn't need a whole lot of usage of them. We had 6 people at the American Legion Hall. 1 family took advantage at the middle school, and 3 families took advantage at the North Belton Middle School. If they needed overnight shelter, what we did is we took those over to Salado at the First Methodist Church there, and there were 3 people altogether that we transported. That's good. Yeah. So to summarize the responses that we had, the city shop, the fleet maintenance personnel responded to 17 city vehicle issues. Those were from a blown motor to vehicle stuck. As far as the water crews and the crews that were working the breaks, we didn't keep a really good track. In fact, that was something Angela has noted and is starting to correct now as a way to track every time we go out there and do some mitigation actions. But the calls were coming in so quick, the crews were going from house to house very quickly, just turning meters off. Parks and Recs, there was some frozen and damage to a flag, which became dangerous. So they went out there and took care of that. They were really part of the Public Works team. They implemented themselves into that team, and whatever Public Works needed, they were out there shutting valves off. They were answering phones. They were making phone calls. They did a great job. Estimated number of calls for Parks and Recs was about 30. Police ran 151 different calls during that event, which is a substantial increase. Fire department, we ran 2 structure fires. Fortunately, both of those structure fires were outside of the city. We ran those as mutual aid. The first one we ran was into Temple's area. Their engine pump froze and they couldn't pump the fire. So when Belton got there, we were able to pump the whole fire for them, put the fire out for them. And then Chief Randalls has called me and really said what a great job these guys done. The second one that we did was at the Hilton fire in Killeen. We took the front side of that building and put up our aerial device and pumped along with 3 other aerial trucks and put that fire out pretty quickly. Y'all know that their sprinkler system was frozen and out of order. So, but we also ran 9 motor vehicle accidents, which is surprisingly low. And I believe it's low because people stayed home. A lot of people took that to heart. Our medical assist calls during that time went up because the ambulances were running people to the hospital. They were getting overwhelmed because people's electricity went out and they went to the hospital as a warming site. But their travel time went from about 15 to 20 minutes to an hour and a half to 2 hours. So we were running a lot of calls, ALS type calls for them, waiting for them to get in. We did 23 public assist and 18 alarm activations during that period. Sam came up and stayed at the city hall for 2 days straight answering phones, and he gave me a list of his phone logs, and they're extensive. Great resource to have somebody there answering phones and answering questions. The fire department, we changed our normal operations to where we wouldn't run on every medical call that we would normally run on. We were running only when the ambulances were gone and if it was a CPR in progress. That freed us up to help the ambulances out a lot more. The police department, they eliminated random patrols and really did stationary patrols, which was smart to try to reduce the amount of fleet accidents. And they hit the high traffic areas and patrolled there. And then Public Works and Parks, all operations were modified to simply deal with the storm. So some strengths that were identified during the process, and this is just a real quick snapshot. The teamwork, flexibility, responsiveness, dedicated employees, preparedness, communication, police and fire all-wheel drive vehicles were amazing during the ice. The ones that were not all-wheel drive didn't do so well. Ability to work remotely was good. So kudos to IT and everything that they've done to really step that whole program up. Some obstacles, limited staffing. We had some people that just couldn't get in from work or from home. Damage to some city facilities, plumbing due to freezing pipes. Slow and dangerous responses. Police, fire, and public works. You get us out on those icy roads and it becomes a slip and slide. Limited winterizing supplies. We don't deal with this very often, so we didn't have a whole lot of supplies built up. Lack of overnight accommodations for city employees, major water break, employees exposed to the cold, limited access to some areas to the city, multiple city vehicles stuck due to traction issues, and then, of course, the power and water outages. So we came up with a list of recommendations. And again, this is a very short summary of it. And you guys got the executive summary and the full AAR, which is very extensive. But some of the top recommendations that we found was making sure that we are forwarding phones if we're going to be closed during normal hours. Make sure those phones, when the public calls, make sure they get a voice. We are creating the emergency service, fire, police, and public works are all creating standard operating guidelines. So when this happens again, we take those lessons learned and put them in writing and say, okay, if we know this is going to happen, this is the steps we're going to take. We are definitely going to open up the Emergency Operations Center a little earlier this next time. I think that would have been a great communication tool to getting people where they're most needed. Continuous messaging of office closures, utility billing changes, not only continuous messaging, but consistent messaging that state the same thing. The city should officially designate emergency essential and non-essential And those people should be trained what that means and their duties that go along with that. Pre-approved contracts with vendors. I think Angela's going to be presenting some vendor appreciation things. They were very, very valuable during this whole process. And lastly, a better water valve marking system, not only at the site, but on a map. So we can quickly identify where those valves are and get them turned off quickly. Again, that was a very brief overview. If you have any questions or comments, I'd be glad to answer them.
On the electronic water meters, is there not like a signal or something that could be picked up on to locate that meter? I was just thinking, since it is electronic and it's.
That's a great question. No, sir, there's not a way for it to electronically locate. We get its meter reading, but not a way to locate.
I tell you what did work well with those is when they see the spike of those, I think it was the Parks Department were manning phones saying, hey, you had a huge spike, go out there and check your water lines because you must have a leak because your usage went triple over the last hour. And that's actually how I got notified that my sprinkler system outside was broken.
Yeah.
They noticed the spike and gave me a call.
I just wonder if there's some kind of device that could be used to locate it because it's electrical. That's not meant for that necessarily, but.
Dividing rods over the water.
I don't know. I just ran
They
into that
actually
in another city where it was kind of hard to find a water shut off, and it was not where you would have thought it would be. And they have the digital or I don't know the term I'm looking for, but whatever the system we have is. But I don't know. It might be worth looking into if there was a cheap retro fit for that.
Very good. Any other questions?
So one of your about using facilities, you said that there wasn't accommodations for employees during that time.
Right.
Do we have a disaster like cots or something? And would that be worth having if we don't?
The county has a disaster trailer that's got, I think it was over 200 cots in it, has some other equipment in it that could be used.
Okay.
But they were very tasked at the
Yeah, I
time
figured,
also.
well, when something like that major happens, it's kind of each to his own and whatever we have. It's kind of, anyway, I just was curious.
Normally,
Because the facilities like this potentially could be repurposed for a season.
right. Normally, the sites that are going to be used for sheltering will keep a stockpile of cots that could be used. I think with the issue that we ran into, not so much fire because we're used to staying there overnight. So they had plenty of food, plenty of water, plenty of places to sleep. But PD and Public Works and Parks Department that normally don't stay overnight, that were working 24 hours. Those are the facilities that we have to kind of rethink our process on. Okay, if this storm is coming, where are we going to house people? So that was something that was a deficiency identified during this. Yeah.
And we had daily calls with the county judge and all the different entities, the fire and emergency folks from across the region. And part of the debate was, does the county set up at the Expo Center or do we rely on shelters across the region? Here are the things that are available, and they were distributed across the region. But localized facilities that we have do merit some reassessment about actually having those items on hand for sleeping and for other kinds of emergency needs.
The other one, and I'm sorry, I didn't read the full document, but do we have facilities that have generators here in Belton? So we do. I would figure that we did. And I think, there's some of the long-term things, like should we as a region have a snowplow? I mean, we always talk about it like once a year, like, man, it would be really nice to at least somebody have one, And should we look at plumbing codes? Are there some things we could do to prevent these types of things, especially for sprinklers in the attic? I mean, there's some things long-term that we don't need to dig into it today. I'm sure you guys have already started those dominoes, but I think it,
Sure.
a lot of that's cheap insurance.
Certainly some buildings that don't have generators that really could benefit from that. And so
Yeah.
we're exploring all those things. and
Okay.
We'll be
Awesome.
coming back to the recommendations on that.
Thank you.
So
And,
we're-
and you guys did it again. You guys did a great job. I know you're self-critical, but what you guys did and the way you were able to pivot our community, even especially the water, you guys did a really good job.
That was well documented by all the department heads and employees that they were very impressed about the overall performance. But when we go through something like this, it's a great opportunity for us to reassess and what can we do better next time? And we're always trying to do self-improvement. So we are going to be our worst critic. Absolutely.
One question and then a comment. Communication was such a critical issue. Could you tell us just a little bit about Code Red and other attempts we made to communicate? I know Sam answered the phone and a lot of folks were able to find my phone number, but I was just concerned about how we try to communicate with so many citizens who did not have television, but most of them still did have mobile phones. What can we do to communicate better and how does Code Red itself work?
Code Red itself is a great program, but it relies, the downfall of Code Red is it relies for that user to go in and sign up for it. And we've promoted it on our website and on our social media. Hey, go in and sign up for it, go in and sign up for it. But, it really relies on that person. So I think that was identified at the AR as we need to do a better job of promoting Code Red. We'd have dedicated people at PD that manage that program for us. So when alerts go out, it goes into a mobile app. It sets your alarm off. You look at it and it gives you a lot of great information. But again, if you don't have yourself signed up on it or have that mobile app, you will not get notified. And that's the downfall of it.
Appreciate y'all putting that on the letter that went out about the water bills and that sort of thing. That was a good catch to put it there. Do we have some tire change for our vehicles, or is that something
We have them on order.
Okay. Someday we will. Yeah, those are helpful and nice.
Yeah, absolutely.
Just one follow-up, as David said, I'm always proud to be a Beltonian, but I was never prouder of the city during that time period because I think everybody pulled together. Citizens curtailed water usage and all the city staff, public works, first responders, everyone really pulled together. And I've heard lots of positive comments about how local government responded, not so much about other governments, but certainly positive about what y'all did. And I think it's appreciated.
The AAR had almost every department head respond back to it. And it was a pretty detailed questionnaire. What I was surprised of is how well and how thoughtful, even not emergency services and public work, but the library and parks and recs and all those smaller departments that really you don't think of whenever an emergency happened, but how thoughtful they were with what they had to do. So I'm very proud of being a part of it also.
I think you should be. I think everybody involved, our entire staff should be proud of the work that they did. So.
Yeah, Mayor and Council, I appreciate your comments and certainly the chief and putting the report together. I'm very, very proud of the team. I think we were quite impressed with what everybody did during the storm and all the events. And I couldn't be prouder either than the effort that was put out and just continuous over time, hour after hour and day after day, and just the continuation of it. So again, kudos to the staff and the entire management team and every employee, every single one.
Thank you very
I
much.
wanted to tell the council, I had my last meeting with my insurance adjuster on my problems, whatever they were. But anyway, one of them was a leak. And he asked me about my water bill. And I told him the city had come through for every citizen and waived it. And my adjuster was from Illinois. He was blown away. I mean, he could not believe it, that a city government would do that for the citizens at no cost. I mean, he could not have been more surprised. I want to tell you, council people, that because, and I've had a lot of people mention that to me. They probably may not call you, but they'll see me on the street or in a restaurant and just say how much they appreciated it.
Well, thank you for sharing that, John. All right. Thanks again, Chief. Item number 5 is to recognize Bell Contractors and TTG Utilities for their assistance following the February 2021 winter storm. And Public Works Director Angela Points is going to address this.
I'll make a few remarks as the mayor is coming up here. We have some pretty special folks here tonight, near and dear to my heart. When the thaw was happening, we were hoping for the best, preparing for the worst. And with a crew of about 9 water and sewer personnel, we knew that we needed immediate help. And we did have parks on our side, and but we knew we needed all hands on deck. We were honestly expecting quite a few water main breaks like our neighboring cities had. And we knew we couldn't handle it on our own. And at that point, when the thaw was happening, those 9 staff members were essentially working 24 hours a day already. So we needed relief. So before the thaw happened, just for a few examples, I texted Jonathan Perez with Bell Contractors, and we have Mike Pilkington here, owner president of Bell. And I texted Jonathan and said, I need help. And he said, we'll be there. That's all he said. You know, whatever you need, we'll be there. We'll send, how many people do you need? I mean, it was just an incredible response. And then I emailed TTG. We have Charles here, who was actually helping us, and Sam, your general superintendent, TTG. I emailed one of our contacts. TTG is doing our South Belton shared use path, and they're an excellent utility contractor. Emailed them, hoping that they're checking email during this time, knowing that they're not working. And Donna and Logan said, send us line locates so we can start helping. I said, whoa, we don't have line breaks yet. So again, you guys sent, both of you guys sent multiple people to help us. And I'll just say that they showed up on site not knowing what they would be doing that day or for the number of days. And they said, just put us somewhere. And they fit right in with our crews. We split them all up. A lot of you went, or your crews went with my people to go turn off meters, go work a few minor breaks. Some of you helped man Public Works at Public Works while our crews got to do our job. Whether you were manning the water station or manning the bulk drop-off event, literally these guys were so humble and so kind, and they listened to instructions. They fit in great. They were great with the customer. Both teams, their work quality was second to none. It was amazing that we could send each of your crews to different locations, and we basically left them alone with our water system. I mean, the amount of trust that we have mutually is just really impressive. And they continue to send us people day after day. And so I just want to say from the bottom of my heart, thank you for helping us because this system is my baby. And you helped me take care of that. And you took care of our customers, and you guys, again, I just appreciate both of you like so much. So if you would like to possibly read the certificate.
I'll just read one since they both say the same thing, but we do certainly appreciate it. Thank you for demonstrating your commitment and support to the city of Belton during the February 2021 winter storm by sending crews at a moment's notice to assist the Public Works emergency response effort. Bell Contractor staff were professional, responsive, followed instructions, and communicated well throughout the ever-changing situation. Your staff's work quality was second to none. Your company made the difference, and the Belton community appreciates Bell Contractors and its professional staff.
Thank you, sir.
But I will read the other one because it's slightly different there. This certificate is awarded to TTG Utilities. Again, thank you for demonstrating your commitment and support to our city during the February 2021 storm by sending crews at a moment's notice to assist the Public Works emergency response effort. TTG utility staff were professional, responsive, followed instructions, and communicated well throughout the ever-changing situation. Your staff work quality was second to none. Your company made a difference, and the Belton community appreciates TTG Utilities and its professional staff. Thank you all for taking time to come tonight too. We appreciate that. The next item on the agenda is the consent agenda. Items 6 through 8 under this section are considered to be routine by City Council and may be enacted by one motion. If discussion is desired, any item may be removed from the consent agenda prior to voting at the request of any council member and will be considered separately. Item 6, to consider the minutes of previous meetings, February 25th, March 9th, and March 9th workshop meeting. Item 7, consider a resolution suspending for 45 days the effective date proposed by Atmos Energy Corporation, Midtex Division, in its application filed on February 26, 2021, pursuant to Section 104.301 of the Gas Utility Regulatory Act, sometimes also referred to as the GRIP statute. Item 8, consider authorizing the city manager to enter into an agreement with James Rittmeyer, Boyd and Thurell, PC, for professional audit services for fiscal years 2021 to 2023 with the option of 2 additional one-year extensions. Any comment or otherwise I would.
We accept the consent agenda as presented.
Second.
All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously. Item 9, to hold a public hearing and consider a zoning change from Neighborhood Service District to Planned Development Single Family 2 on approximately 5.09 acres located on Huey Drive and described as Liberty Valley Phase 1, Block 6, Lot 0001. Recommend conducting the public hearing and approve the ordinance authorizing the zoning change from Neighborhood Service District to Planned Development Single Family 2 District as recommended by the P&Z at their meeting on March 16th, 2021. So I'd open the public hearing. Anyone? Okay. Tina, are you going to present the item then?
Yes, sir. Wow, that's a tough act to follow with all that recommendations and awards. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The subject property is located south of I-14. Oop, I'm sorry. Let's try that again with the right tools. Okay, south of I-14, and it's also on the east side of Loop 121 on the north side of Huey Drive. Here's a zoomed in look at the property. This property has been zoned to several different commercial uses dating back to 2004 and has remained undeveloped. Here are the surrounding zoning for this property. As you can see, there are some commercial 2, and commercial PD, commercial highway. And this property is zoned neighborhood service. The surrounding properties have a residential zoning district as well, commercial single family 2, ag, and single family 3 zoning district. The applicant is a potential buyer looking at this property and he wants to rezone it for residential use. The minimum lot sizes that he's proposing is 6,000 square feet, which is compatible with the existing residential zoning districts. For the lot, he is requesting a couple of potential variances. As stated, this is planned development, single family 2 zoning district. However, he's asking for a reduced minimum lot size. Instead of the 7,500, he's requesting for 6,000. Instead of a foot width, he's requesting 50. And the front yard setback, he's requesting 20 instead of the 25. And the side setback, 5 as opposed to 6. On the future land use map, this is designated as commercial. However, this is part of the design area type 9, which allows for a mixture of uses based on the context of the surrounding land use. Because there are residential land use around this property, it seems like a compatible use with the existing residential zoning and uses. The PD appears to be a reasonable request at this location. Notices were sent out to property owners within 200 feet of the property. The city received no letters of opposition or support for this rezoning. The Planning and Zoning Commission met on March 16th with a vote of 6-0, voted to recommend this for approval with the following condition. So this will follow the single family 2 zoning district. However, it will allow for that minimum lot size to be 6,000. Front yard lot width to, the lot width to 50, the front yard setback to 20, and the side setback to 5. As part of the design area 9, that would have to meet those regulations. Site development standards, building design, not necessarily the material, but the roof pitch for the building design standards. And if there are Belton heritage trees, we want to make sure that they are preserved. A final subdivision plat will be required and will be presented to City Council and Planning and Zoning prior to any approval of a subdivision. With that, I will be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
What are the sizes of the lots in the surrounding neighborhoods? Are they 7,500 or 6,000 or what?
Correct. The Liberty, apologize, let me get back to the map. The Liberty Valley subdivision, those lot sizes are 7,500. The ones to the north in the bridge at Bell Meadows, those are 5,000 square feet lots.
Is this part of the HOA or the neighborhood, or is it separate?
It is part of the Liberty Valley neighborhood.
Any other questions or comments, Tina?
I know this isn't a plat meeting, and that's probably where we would find this out, but at the same time, when do you discuss some of these things at zoning or at platting? But so I'm assuming they're probably going to put several lots in there. So I'm assuming it would look like the area to the right of that picture in that spot.
They actually provided 2 concept drawings. They're not quite sure what they want to do, so that's why we haven't provided those yet. We're hoping that we could possibly get them and the neighboring property that's also looking at potential rezoning to the north to come up with some kind of connection between the 2 subdivision for right of way. So that's why we haven't provided that, because we're hoping that we can talk the 2 developer into doing some additional connection between the streets. But he's looking at possibly developing anywhere from 20 to 23 lots.
Because that's kind of, I don't know, again, this may not be the place, but it's kind of, if it's going to be a 5,000 square foot lot, it kind of needs to tie into a neighborhood with other 5,000 square foot lots. If it's not, and it's going to be part of this subdivision, it would kind of be desirable to match the lot sizes in this subdivision. But again,
And
I don't
I
know
will,
where the appropriate time to discuss that is, but
right. And I will say this is mostly staff recommendation as well. They wanted to reduce it down to single family 3. And we thought, well, this is an opportunity for that PD to say, hey, you got to come up with a higher lot size to match that neighboring subdivision, because there are 7,500. So that's why the compromise between the single family 2 and single family 3 zoning districts.
And there's no variances in all that SF2. It's straight SF2.
Well, it's a planned development, so there would be.
Actually, it's straight single family 2, but I want to say there was a variance for the front yard setback to 20 instead of 25.
The motion says to plan development, single family too.
No, I was talking about the rest of the
Liberty Valley.
Liberty Valley.
Gotcha.
But this is just one of those situations where, you know, you try to maintain some consistency in the neighborhood. And, you know, I know it's a little different than if you were dealing with infill in a historic neighborhood. You know, yeah, you kind of want some design consistency and things like that. But you've got this pretty good sized development that's been put in here at 7,500 square foot lots. And now and the entrance to that, basically, at least off 121, you're going to put a higher density, smaller lot section in there in a addition that's not going to be the same.
The property is kind of a transitional piece between the single family 2 area and the commercial area to the west. You go back to the zoning map, Tina. Obviously currently proposed for neighborhood service, business use, and obviously the developer seeing the benefit for residential use here and is proposing single family. I think as the staff spoke with them, and the original proposal was for SF3, this is kind of between SF3 and SF2. It's larger than SF3, 5,000 foot lots, but it's a little bit smaller than the 7,500 square foot lot. So it is a bit of a compromise in and of itself, and is more consistent with the neighborhood, I guess I would argue, being residential than being neighborhood service. So there's a little bit of compromise going on both sides. Have a transitional, single-family, detached residential area in a location originally proposed for neighborhood service.
Well, and you took the words out of my mouth. As far as zoning and consistent use, we see SF3, SF1, SF2 on one side to the east, and we're looking at SF2 and SF2 with a star on the west. So I think it's more consistent. And again, the platting will come later, I'm assuming, as we go through all of that. So those kind of concerns, you guys, I guess, understand that. So
I just wanted to at least have the conversation right now, because we're not going to have it in planning.
Is we've created sort of a buffer
Yes.
with the commercial there,
Yes.
which I think is a good idea. All the while, when we are looking at affordability, because the more affordable we make it for a developer, the more affordable it is for the purchasers. And affordability is becoming a word that doesn't exist too much. But I think anything, I think anything we can do to help in that is wise, I think is a good idea.
Any other questions or comments?
You're going to be bound though by the SF2 if you approve this.
No, it's a PD, John, with the recommendation, the basic criteria of SF2, but the minimum lot size is 6,000 square feet. So it's
That's what, unless you specifically say that. I just want to be clear on that.
And it
That's in the
says
ordinance.
it's yellow all around it. That's at least on that PDF is SF2. So SF2. So
Well, that's why I wanted to have the conversation now, because my crystal ball tells me when we get to plating, we're going to have the conversation again. Well, that's something you talk about in zoning. Not saying I'm against it. I just want to have the conversation
No.
now, because I think now is the time
Now's
to
the
have
time,
that
right.
conversation.
The determination of the lot sizes is now with the zoning, and the PD as provided for in the ordinance would allow the basic criteria of a SF2 district, but 6,000 square foot lots rather than 7,500. Again, kind of a transitional piece of property with some other slight adjustments in lot width and setback. So again, kind of a transitional area, but those would be the governing features of the plat when the plat comes forward.
It still would be nice to try to encourage, I know you're doing that, but to try to encourage that tie to that other neighborhood with similar size lots, just from an aesthetic and a look, to tie into that rather than be tied to Liberty Valley.
Yes, sir.
and I would have
That's just my opinion.
And I would have honestly expected probably more of a multifamily to come in after commercial, then go multifamily, then SF1 or 2. But coming in with single family is actually a higher, better use or whatever, higher use than multifamily. So with that, I'd make a motion that we approve the zoning as suggested or as shown.
Second.
All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Thank you, ma'am, for presenting that.
Thank you.
We did. Yep. And then nobody spoke, so we went straight.
We just had it before we knew what we were having.
Speaking of public hearings, item 10 is to hold a public hearing, consider an ordinance amending Chapter 3, Article 1, Section 3 through 3.1, confining small animals and fowl, proximity to residents thereof. The Code of Ordinances related to the position of chickens within the city limits. So we have a public hearing. Would anyone from the public like to speak to the chicken issue? If there being no one to speak to that, Chief Ellis, Assistant City Manager, is going to present a report on chickens.
Well, thank you, Mayor and Council. You may remember a couple of months ago, a citizen came and spoke during public comments about our ordinance regarding fowl, primarily chicken. That's the main fowl we talk about. And they felt that it was too restrictive. About 6 years ago, you changed the ordinance to allow some more flexibility in it. We took it down to 50 feet with a permit. So you could be between 50 and 200 feet with a permit, provided that you had a clean enclosure, no foul odors, your neighbors didn't object. You had a waste disposal plan and a reasonable number of birds for the size, the enclosure. This particular resident was requesting us go even lower. Staff studied this. We looked at what some other cities were doing. And the result of that is we're coming back at you proposing to lower that threshold for the permit to 25 feet minimum. And then also add roosters in there. Everything else would stay the same. Roosters was just something we missed the last time we brought this forward. And they're normally the main source of a complaint is a rooster. And so 25 feet to 200 feet, anything over 200 feet, it's an absolute right. They don't need any kind of permit. We're proposing that to you to consider making this slight adjustment to accommodate. Chickens are more popular than ever. People want to be self-sustaining, and during the pandemic, especially, we saw a lot of that. Typically, we don't learn about chickens until there's been a complaint from a neighbor. Our code compliance folks don't just go out looking for them. It's normally in reference to a complaint. And I'd be happy to take any questions on this issue.
I have a question to that comment about complaints. How many complaints do you get?
I do not have that number, but if we get, if we're notified about chickens or have an issue with chickens, it's because we've had a complaint.
So it's not often.
It's regular. Okay. I wouldn't say it's not often. It's regular. And if there's a rooster, it's definite.
So that's 25 foot. That was a little fast, but that's 25 foot from your neighbor's
Yes, sir.
house.
Yes, sir.
Structure.
Does not count your house, but it does count any of your neighbors. Their actual dwelling unit, not any sheds or anything they have out in the backyard.
Okay.
I know there was some proposals to allow the free ranging. The problem with that is there's no feet then, so they can be right up against the fence. And as you saw in your last item, that some of these lots are 5 foot setbacks on the side, and that's pretty close to somebody's house.
And there is no number. It's just a reasonable amount. That's what we changed last time, because I think used to maybe there was a number, but didn't we? I guess we just kind of.
I don't know if we had a number in there, but we did have add that reasonable language, and that goes. Our animal control folks are trained in making that judgment. And there's some kind of guide they use on how many, I guess, square feet or inches or whatever it is a laying hen needs.
And so if someone would not have come to propose that we relook at the ordinance, it colors what we would do. Would we want to go down to 25? I mean, if we were to just do this from scratch, we would say 25 to 200 with all this stuff, no roosters. We feel comfortable with that? Or is this really just kind of trying to accommodate the So
Well, I think it's a little bit of both. I think, you know, we're trying to be reasonable and provide good customer service. We recognize that in the last 6 years, raising of chickens in more densely populated areas are more popular. There was a push to go to zero, to allow free ranging, keep the roosters and all that. We think that would have probably been just too far, especially in, you know, in some very densely populated areas that if they cannot get 25 feet from their neighbor, it could become a bigger problem.
Okay.
As a comment, when the request was made, I got the address and went out and drove. And that is one of the subdivisions, similar, I think, to Liberty Valley. And I don't know what the side lot lines were, but my goodness, the 5-ish, 5 to 10 or something like that. So they were pretty tight, but I just observed and I felt like it was clean, well kept, and I wasn't getting any noise, but it wasn't early in the morning when we were after worms either.
Any other questions or comments? Well, I appreciate your looking at this, and I don't want to discourage anyone from raising chickens, but I do understand why neighbors would be concerned about keeping roosters in the yard. I would certainly be concerned if my neighbor had roosters, and I understand that.
If I could, and I, especially in regard to the rooster issue, I think anybody that just does eggs, who needs roosters? But if we need babies, we need roosters. So if Kerry Leach would be willing to come up and just, I don't know his position with roosters, but I would just, I think to have that kind of comment, I think might be helpful.
As one that's had chickens as one that has had chickens in Belton since about 1976, I was the reason I think they changed the ordinance in 2014. I don't have roosters. I've had them in the past, but I think the new ordinance should not include roosters. I think that's a smart move. I think free range chickens in the city, I let mine out some for about 20 minutes or 30 minutes to get a little grass, and I herd them back into the pen, that kind of thing. So, I don't think you need free range. 25 feet's close. It's close, it's according to how many chickens they have or whatever, but 25, and I appreciate Chief Ellis, in 2014, Temple paper came on and said that Coach called us foul. I still have that article on my phone. It's crazy, but no, I think the new ordinance is good. I thought the old ordinance was good. I think either or, but I definitely think it needs to include no roosters for sure. If you want chickens, you got to go buy the baby chickens from the feed store, and thus you have an economy.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I suspect the mortality rate is a little less with bought babies more than laid babies, huh?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Anything else, sir?
That's all I got.
Thank you, Kerry, for coming and sharing your chicken
Yeah, thank you.
stories.
And a happy cluck to you too.
If there's no more questions concerning chickens or roosters, I would entertain a motion.
We had a public. We did. Nobody answered.
We did, but nobody publicly commented.
Who does those now before we have discussion?
Yeah. Okay. I'll try to stay awake for the next.
We've had 2 public hearings with no public comments.
Unusual. Not. Any motions?
I'll motion that we approve the ordinance as written.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Okay, the new ordinance passes unanimously. Thank you, Chief. And thank you for coming, Kerry. All right. Item 11 is to consider an ordinance adopting budget amendment number 1 to the City of Belton fiscal year 2021 annual budget. And Mr. Rogers is going to present that information to us.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Tonight I'm presenting to you an ordinance to do amendment number 1 to the fiscal year 2021 budget. So before we get started into 2021, let me kind of give you a little history of 2020 and how we got here. Well, you'll recall towards the end of fiscal year 2020, the city of Belton was allocated $1,225,000 of coronavirus relief funds in the CARES Act of 2020. In October, council decided to use that money for a couple of purposes. One, we issued or provided $300,000 of small business grants. We also moved $925,000 worth of expenditures, public safety expenditures, from the general fund into the grant fund, essentially waiting for reimbursement for those public safety expenditures. We did receive those funds, all $1.2 million of those funds, on February 23rd of 2021. So now where we stand is because we moved $925,000 worth of costs out of the general fund and into the grant fund, the general fund reported over $2 million of net income at the end of fiscal year 2020. So in that October meeting, I explained to council, once we receive this money back and get reimbursed for those costs, then I would come back to you with a budget amendment to decide now, how do you want to spend that $2 million, well, it was $2 million at the time, but that $2 million of increase of net income in fiscal year 20. So that's where we are now. So there's several amendment items, and I'll go through each one of these for your discussion. Amendment item number 1 relates to sales tax and street maintenance, sales tax revenue. So far, sales tax revenue is about 6% over last year, and also around 6% over what we budgeted for the year. So I am pretty comfortable raising our sales tax revenue budget upwards by $250,000 to $4,511,000. And so street maintenance, you'll recall during our discussion for the fiscal year 2020 budget, we deferred all street maintenance, the street maintenance program in fiscal year 2021 as a kind of a budget cut measure, as the whole COVID effect was unknown when we were going through the adoption process. Well, I'm coming before you tonight with amendment item number 1, which will not only provide the $500,000 for street maintenance that we typically try to include in every budget year, but we'd also like to use that $250,000 of additional revenue, sales tax revenue, to make a street maintenance program for fiscal year 21 total $750,000 for the year. Will we spend that? Yes, we will. In fact, Angela has that map in her hands as we speak right now.
I think the frozen tundra thing may help contribute to some of those opportunities.
Yes, it did. It certainly added to the additional 250,000. You're correct, sir. Amendment item number 2 related to bunker gear and generators. So firefighters can be exposed to COVID-19, their bunker gear, as they're wearing bunker gear. And today, we do not have a second set of bunker gear for firefighters to change into while their exposed gear is being cleaned. So with $105,000, we'd like to increase the clothing appropriations in the fire department's budget to buy a second set of bunker gear for all firefighters. That has uses beyond COVID-19 exposure, obviously. It's just a good practical item to have. We also deferred for this fiscal year in our adopted budget, putting battery backups, I call them generators because I'm an accountant, not an engineer. But it's actually battery backups for our 3 tornado sirens that we have in the city. Those are about $22,000 each, and we can do 3 of those, which is this time of year is a good thing for us to have a battery backup on each of those sirens. Amendment item number 3 is related to the parks maintenance building. You'll recall probably a few years back that we set aside $40,000 kind of for half of a building. And one of those items, again, that we deferred for 21 when we were considering the budget for adoption, we'd like to come back and put aside another $40,000 to actually completely fund that building for parks use, for a parks maintenance building. Amendment item number 4 relates to safety upgrades. We'd like to do $56,000 of active shooter kind of protection projects. This is your bulletproof glass, that type of stuff. For 3 locations, 3 facilities, Fire Station number 2, Harris Community Center, and Public Works. We've already set aside $100,000 to do some other buildings. This is the remaining of active shooter projects that aren't completely funded. And we'd like to take care of that with amendment item number 4. Amendment item number 5 is related to contributions to nonprofits. In November, the City Council provided $25,000 to the Belton Senior Center for a kind of a food assistance program. That program, it's our understanding, has been an amazing success. And with another $25,000, we'd like to continue that. That can provide funding to continue that program probably through the summer. I think they're doing over 50, is it a week? 50 visits a week, providing 50 bags of groceries a week. Also for $5,000, we'd like to put as seed money, if you will, for the Fort Hood Habitat for Humanity to do kind of neighborhood revitalization projects here in Belton. It's kind of, again, to get a program started with Habitat for Humanity. Item number 6 relates to East 13th Avenue sidewalks. This sidewalk project is actually currently in our 5-year CIP. In fact, it's scheduled to begin in 2022. So you would see this with next year's budget anyway. We've been awarded a grant for construction. However, we need to design the project and we need to pay for our city match. And for $330,000, we can basically advance fund this project to get all of our side done and start that on time in 2022 as we planned. And then finally, item 7 is the 6th Avenue water relocation. You heard even during this storm, 6th Avenue water line is causing us much heartburn and headache. Those lines need to be replaced and relocated. It's going to cost about $500,000 to design the project. I don't remember how much the actual construction costs are estimated to be, but a lot. Let's just leave it at that. I have to design it first.
More than that.
So what this amendment item does is we have 2 accounts that we currently have budgeted that we're not likely to use in fiscal year 2021. We have $400,000 budgeted in this account called strategic plan elements. Essentially what that was going to be used for was a master plan update for the utilities. We're not going to get that done by the end of the fiscal year, so we can repurpose that towards 6th Avenue. We also have $50,000 in contingency in the utility fund. We'd also like to repurpose that for this project. Essentially, we would be able to use this, do this design for $50,000 of reserves from the water and sewer fund. So staff recommends approval of this ordinance for budget amendment number 1. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Questions or comments from the council?
Only question I have is, we know that these 7 made the cut. Do you have an item at the top of your list that didn't make the cut? Did you have anything else?
Yes, there are other things that we discussed during our budget. You may recall during last year's discussion, we ended up with an essential list and a non-essential list, if you recall that. What we're able to do, and that was as we were doing that budget cut kind of exercise last year, or for this fiscal year. There are still some things that are on that list of things that we deferred. But City Council, I used priorities that were provided by City Council kind of as a ranking. And some of the stuff, so what I'm funding now are the higher ranked items that we deferred from the adopted budget. So that's why there's other items that we could consider. And those, as we continue along, maybe a budget amendment number 2, as we firm up the budget, we can do those things too.
I guess just, I mean, I like what you've got here and I don't really see any reason to change it, but just because my memory's bad and I don't have that in front of me, but to Daniel's point, can you give us a little bit of a refresher on a few of those items that are still left?
Sure. A couple of them that come to mind are there was a replacement neighborhood park equipment adjacent to Sparta Elementary. And we just didn't feel like that rose to the occasion of a need right now.
Street signs was
Street
one.
signs, replacing all the street signs, do that over 1 year, 2 year, 3 year. That was another item. So those were a couple of the items that come to mind immediately. We had also talked about TMRS and other personnel items. We were able to do that at the beginning as a part of the fiscal year 21 budget. So those, have been addressed basically at this point in time until we get into the 21 budget, or excuse me, the 22 budget.
Well, I would just say, let's keep looking at those items and keep bringing them back to us if we find ways to fund those.
Certainly.
Well, I appreciate, well, first of all, that I think you guys have prioritized them correctly. I think we've got the most urgent needs like street maintenance and that stuff. And like the 6th Avenue, getting a head start on that, getting that design, getting it ready to go, and not putting that burden on the water sewer fund, which has taken a hit, lately. So again, I think it's all well planned. I mean, I'm always kind of reluctant to, when you get windfalls, you're not always, if you have a tight budget, you're going to buy food, you're going to pay for electricity. But when you get a windfall, you go out and buy something that you regret and you have buyer's remorse. And so I think there's a few things on here that I think we could probably quibble and argue and say, I think that's a buyer's remorse thing. We just had the money. We had to find a place to spend it. So we're just going to spend it here. But for the most part, what you presented, I think is all very strategic and it's going to help those that need it, so I'm in favor.
Angela, do you have an idea of how long the design process would take for 6th Avenue?
I think 6 months would probably be adequate for the design process.
Thank you. I know that's one that we desperately needed, and I'm glad that we're able to come back and, as David said, move some money around here and there and go ahead and get started on that, because I know the folks down there are going to really appreciate it. They're not going to be happy when we tear up the street, but they're going to be happy when we get it redone. So thank you, Mike.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments?
Hey, one more comment. This is a little on topic, a little off topic. It goes back to what we were talking about earlier, but we are talking about budget amendments here for things that we need. One thing about the storm and some of the things y'all probably learned, you were talking about traction and things like that. I think maybe you're already doing this, and if you are, just great. If you're not, any vehicle we buy, especially a public works pickup or anything like that. Now, some of the fire and police, some of those vehicles, maybe this isn't going to be applicable, but we should be buying 4-wheel drive in any kind of pickup that we buy. I mean, the cost for that is not that much, and the payoff down the road and the potential need for it and use of it far outweighs the initial cost. So I don't know if that's spec'd into your city vehicles, but it probably should be.
I don't know that we've made that strategic decision to do that uniformly, but we certainly learned during the crisis that only the 4-wheel drive vehicles worked during this time period. So there were a lot of vehicles parked as a result. Now,
It just doesn't cost that much more up front. And the need part, especially with the city vehicle, is going to outweigh that little bit of upfront cost.
We'll definitely take that into consideration as we plan our capital purchases. Thank you.
Again, kind of on topic, kind of
No,
off
that's
topic.
good. Thank you.
It's a good suggestion, Guy. I think lots of folks were stranded two-wheel drive vehicles and some in four-wheel drive vehicles.
Well, I was
for that
glad
matter.
to have it. You know, you don't need it very often, but when you need it, it's really good to have it.
Mine was in pieces in a garage. I was really thinking, I think I'm just gonna drive it looking like it is. It was in bad shape.
We just started doing that as a company several years ago. Any vehicle we buy is four-wheel drive, and now some of that's for resale on the back end, for rental. If we need to put them into rent, then that's desired, but it just makes sense for the cost.
Do I hear a motion to adopt the budget amendments?
I move we approve item 11 as presented.
Second.
All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, same sign. And it passes unanimously. Thank you,
Thank you.
Mike. And looking forward to hearing about what that other money from the latest government
Right.
program is going
Anxiously
to
awaiting that
entail.
information as well.
What kind of red tape and hoops that we are going to need to jump through to take care of that. But it's a nice problem
Yes.
to be able to anticipate it at least. And item 12 is to hear a presentation and discuss electric scooters as a transportation alternative in the community. And Mr. Bates is going to present that. But before he does, those of you who did not make it down to Heritage Park over the weekend to see the Belton Open Professional and Amateur Disc Golf Contest, I was totally amazed at the number of participants from out of the area, from out of state, the amount of TV coverage. And I talked to quite a few people, and the head of the Professional Disc Golf Association was there and bragged about that this was the best parks department that they had worked with. And that Matt and his crew were outstanding in helping them take care of a very large event. So kudos to you and your staff, because it was a great event. And I'm going to take up disc golf now. I got to meet a young man who just signed a $10 million contract to throw a Frisbee. I thought, maybe we should re-examine that. So, go ahead, Matt. Thank you.
Certainly come a long way from when we remember with cigarettes and beers and throwing a few Frisbees. So appreciate the kind words there. Mayor, Council, opportunity for me just to bring something to the table for a discussion. John has been like a little child all day waiting to talk about e-scooters. And so this is here my opportunity to really get us involved and discuss it. So there we go. So, but here we are, Council. This is an opportunity for us to have a discussion in a proactive form. You guys have probably seen, heard, read about e-scooters, the good, the bad, the ugly, and cities and how they've kind of come into our lifestyles, but also some of the challenges they bring. Often, city councils are doing this, reacting to scooters being dropped in their community. We have an opportunity with some requests that have come our way to at least foster this conversation from a high level and from a visionary perspective and a policy perspective for you, council, for us to then to go back to work and see what might be the future for Belton. So first of all, why am I, Parks and Rec, presenting to you? I have an extensive experience riding scooters. You'll see my family there. This was a good picture. I left out the picture of the scars that bear a very expensive ER bill in Austin, but nevertheless, it was something that was brought to us, and with management, we just kind of looked and let's take a look and really see what we can bring out here. I want to explain to you really specifically what we're looking at today. You can buy these for your own personal use, and you can utilize them on roadways and operate around town. You may have seen some people that do, but really what we're talking about is this kind of ride share approach, this micro mobility, this kind of buzzword that people keep using, and how that works. So you see us on our scooters right there. How does that work? Well, you have it, you download an app, whatever it's related to that scooter. That app will often require you, this one, the Bird app did require you to scan your driver's license and your credit card. And at that point, you unlock this scooter, and then you can start riding it. Some of you from TML in San Antonio may have remembered. Yeah, absolutely, it was a good time. And so you ride it to a destination, you then hop off that scooter, you have to park it, take a picture, closes it, and it stops charging you. Okay, it's usually around about $1 to unlock, and it charges you by the duration, the time, and most rides are around the $5 range. They're really 1 to 4 mile ranges from the industry is kind of what they see predominantly in them. So that's what we're talking about today. There are some things we will introduce to you that as these scooters are becoming more introduced, to correct some of the issues, they are doing some time zones. So shutting these scooters down so you cannot ride them at certain times, geofencing certain areas so you cannot ride them into certain areas, and that kind of stuff. So we'll kind of go through that. The history, so why thus we're bringing it to talk to you today. In November, Bird Company, a scooter company, reached out to the city expressing an interest in the city fostering or pursuing a fleet manager. This is kind of an entrepreneur role. This is a little different to what they've done in the past. So traditionally, if you're talking about Austin and San Antonio, you're talking 15 to 20,000 scooters dumped to the city, and then basically people that collect them, charge them, put them back out into certain corners, and they get a little bit of money for that, and the kind of the world goes round. What this model is more focused on, and probably ones that would fit for our size city, is this fleet manager. So a smaller fleet, that is an individual person. It's not a company per se managing. It's an employee almost of that company managing them. And then they would be responsible for the repair, for what they call rebalancing, which is picking them up, and charging them, and then putting back into a proper spot. We were approached by that in November. At that point, we started to have some initial discussions, realized and felt from a city perspective that it really wasn't our business to be seeking out an entrepreneur, right? That would probably more come from the private side, and redirected Bird to kind of see if there was interest in the community. And if there was, we told them that we would bring it to council and to management review at that time to see. They did that. They've since have told us they've located a fleet manager, and they would love to bring 50 scooters to Belton to see if it would work on this kind of fleet manager. We also, late in February, got a second request. So obviously our city must be on some kind of message board that possibly we're looking into scooters, and this another one had reached out. This one a little different in its model, but really was trying to focus on collaboration between the city, UMHB, and potentially the ISD. And so I will mention that we do have Steve Theodore also joining us on the Zoom. He's certainly interested, I'm sure, like you are a lot, to see what scooters would mean, especially with the demographic of his population there on the campus would probably be some of the heavier users. Micromobility, this is where we really start to kind of discuss it and get a feel for it. Really, with some high level ones, it obviously reduces cars. That's the kind of warm and fuzzies of it. Every person that takes a trip, it's a car ride that's not taking it. It does connect more people. I think we often refer to it as the first and last mile. As an opportunity for some people who do not have a vehicle, or you're a student, or you're low income housing, you can grab one of these and get to where you need to get to. And often you are riding these to a destination. You rarely are just riding them to ride them. You're like wanting to go to a shop or a coffee shop or something like that. So the cons, well known, it's the clutter, it's how they look on your sidewalks. Everyone's seeing the pileups in Dallas and Austin. That's probably it. An injury rate. They have obviously, they're not on the line, but joining us tonight, but certainly they will tell you that it's much safer than we possibly think, but that it does raise your injury rate within your community with just people riding scooters who haven't ridden them since they were a child, and now they go 15 to 20 miles an hour.
I grew up on a gravel road. That didn't work.
Yeah, exactly. So you've been there, and obviously I bear some serious drama with my own instant there. And so they have that riders in places, people riding scooters where they shouldn't be riding them or not wanted to be riding them. So, that's sidewalks in certain areas, trails that you don't want people on. And the ability of riders I've discussed, people that, if you just hop on them and then you just go 0 to 60 type thing, and you're not ready for what that brings. And also in a community, which I would say like Belton, you're going to be sitting there with drivers who are not familiar with people on there, in either bicycles or these kind of scooters. And so just that balance of who owns the road and sharing and all that kind of stuff. So I hope I've explained kind of just the general premise of what we're talking about. Micromobility can be an electric bicycle too, though. So just think about just general things that you've seen. We saw a guy on a kind of wheelie board, hoverboard the other day at the park. And, these things are becoming more common. And whether it happens now with a scooter, I just think that this is something for us good to be proactively talking about. So really what we're here to, yes, sir, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to ask a question. Would you anticipate, and is there some history of percentages of accidents with scooters versus, because I think the speed we talked about is not, you can't go as fast as you can on a bicycle.
No.
And we probably have accidents on bicycles because we have created, because we wanted them, hike and bike trails.
Yes.
So we have bikes that do this, which are human powered. And these would help really, really old, nice people who can't pedal bicycles to go places.
There's probably a lot out there and something that we could kind of bring back to you on just some examples that cities have put out. Some cities have shown data that there's been an increase in ER visits. And then, like I said, the mobility companies will be telling you, well, that's just more people now using these types of equipment. So of course, there's going to be a propensity to have more accidents. So that would be the two sides to give you on that.
So the other question I would have is, I'm sorry, just jumping, is liability experience like San Antonio? When we were at TML in San Antonio, really enjoyed the opportunity to do that. And you can catch on pretty quickly. It'd be nice for folks to have a little training. Of course, you have to have a driver's license, I think you said, and a credit card. So, and I'm sure folks like San Antonio governance have figured out the liability thing.
So, yeah. So on the safety issue, UT Austin Mechanical Engineering Department has had several initiatives on coming up with ways to make these things safe. The demographic in Austin is 18 to 34 in spades. Outside of that, not so much. And they have significant number of accidents. And this is head trauma accidents. This is not just bumps and bruises. This is because it's just the way that your weight is. It's not 0 to 60 that's the problem. It's when you hit the pebble on the road and you face plant. It's significant. And so I think that I think that there is an injury issue, but obviously they're covered because it's in the fine print. So when you do the scan and you do this and you sign the thing, well, it says you are responsible for your own accidents, and you are acknowledging that you know how to ride these, and you acknowledge that you're wearing a helmet and all the things that they say that you're not doing. And I think that's my biggest concern is safety. And the other part of safety, and you mentioned it, is just jogging or walking across the street. Drivers don't see you. So you think you've got the green light and they've stopped, and then they'll pull right in front of you. And so that's a concern. And also the safety of one being left on a sidewalk in the evening and somebody walking down and tripping over it because they didn't see it. Because we do have a lot of people in the evening walking the hike and bike trails and downtown. So I think for me, the safety is the number one concern. Outside of that, it's kind of cool. And I think, and maybe Dr. Theodore would have an opinion on what that does for his campus, whether that's a good thing or a bad thing.
I think connectivity wise, you'd get a lot more student use coming downtown. There's a lot of kids that don't have a car, don't drive, don't want to leave campus because they have the essentials there. But I think they would come down. I don't anticipate seeing many of these near, Belton High School, anything like that. That's a pretty hefty trip outside of what we know our hotspot is. There'd be a few, but I think the hotspots you're going to see is Courthouse. You'll see a lot of drop off, I think, there. So along those safety issues, overnight, if we did it and we could create, those weird corners where the angled parking is, where you can't, really park. It's not necessarily an accessible walkway or a ramp, creating a green zone that's, scooter parking or something along those lines would aid in that safety issue. But, being young and living for the thrill of it, I love the scooters. So
Didn't you break both
Hey,
wrists
hey,
one
hey,
time?
hey.
seeking
Hey,
that
hey,
thrill?
Not on a scooter.
I think the safety and the liability issue is what concerns me. I really do like the idea of if the interest is there at Mary Hardin Baylor, opportunity for students to come downtown without ever getting on a city street with their trails. But does that, are people going to be dodging out of control students coming down the hike and bike trail too? I guess is another issue.
I'd say no more or less than them dodging a bicycle at this point. I mean,
That's probably
Yeah.
true.
So the other one, you mentioned it right at the end. So scooters isn't the only one. Bird has bicycles, and those are much safer.
Yeah.
They obviously are more costly too.
Yeah.
So that we may not be a demographic that they would be interested in bringing bikes, but I would be more. I would, and also it's hard to just the scooters just fall over easy. The
Mhm.
bike you kind of can set up. I think if we were to have something, we would need to have several zones identified as pickup and drop off zones instead of just free everywhere, because that way at least people would train over time. They go over here.
I guess the only other comment I would make is downtown Belton business, whatever that DBMA. I'd love to hear feedback from them on, because I think that's where you'll see the issue is people going in and out of the gym, the concrete area, up and down the sidewalks under the awning. So I think that would be the most impacted area business wise.
And we do in regards to that central business district, it is one of the ordinances that we have in place that we don't, this was the skateboard problem years ago. And so they include other such uses like this that we would not allow to ride them on the sidewalk. And now, again, they can do some geofencing and stuff, but again, sometimes hard to, you can certainly try to tell people what to do. Whether they'll listen to you, it's always another thing, but it certainly offers us an ability if there's behavior of that nature, then we can curtail it.
So you also said, I think I heard you right, that the person or the person responsible for these, they would actually be moving them around. So they kind of patrol and
Yeah.
pick these up and put them back where they're supposed to go.
Yep.
So they don't just leave them out there for days where they shouldn't be.
A little bit of a comment back to when we were talking about, incentivizing and obviously Dr. Theodore on the line as well with that stuff. But the fleet manager is going to be incentivized to get scooters to where people are picking them up, right? So he's not just going to evenly, let's just say we said the whole city. He's not going to evenly spread that across. I would say any scooter company, that would be an unrealistic idea. They're going to try to put them where they think people are going to pick them up at. Now you can have, Waco has a very similar model to what we've just gone through in their downtown zone. They brought 50 scooters in, geofenced the area so you couldn't go past certain areas or it'd slow you down to a point where it was just irritating. And then they had priority zones where that was for the company to know to rebalance. So if Baylor is the example. So if a scooter ends up on Baylor, they know from their GPS that they need to go get that scooter pretty quick in a reasonable amount of time. And there's elements and tools that are used if we were interested in pursuing that we can then put that into right within 24 hours, you must collect this or however that would be. But those were some examples that were being shared with us just from other cities and talking with them through some of the stuff.
Can Dr. Theodore hear us?
Yep, let's there he is.
There he is. Steve, would you like to make a comment from the university perspective?
Yes, sir. Thank you. And thanks for inviting me. I'm not going to pretend that I know a whole lot about the scooter business. When I was made aware of this presentation, Gene let me know, gave me a heads up, which I appreciated. I did a little bit of homework on the scooters. And I would voice some of the same concerns that most of you have already expressed. My bigger concern, I think David was expressing safety, which is one, but my bigger concern is the clutter. The company, as I understand it, has their model is a scooter can be left pretty much wherever you get off and take a picture and you move on. Whereas other companies, I don't know the names, have docking stations, and you have to leave the scooter back at that docking station. Doing so prevents clutter. People just dumping on the sidewalk or in a field somewhere. And I understand that the company has a financial interest in rebalancing, and that you would hope that they would do that. Some of the campuses that I did some research on, it's a struggle. Now, they didn't have 50, they had many, many more. So the clutter was what little I know, and I certainly am not trying to dissuade anybody here, but what little I know about the bird and the scooter program, Mayor Hardin-Baylor probably wouldn't be interested. I think I picked up on your comment a minute ago about Baylor. You go pick them up at the points up there, so I'm assuming Baylor doesn't prefer to have one either, but I don't know for a fact. But because of the clutter and because of the safety issues, Mayor Hardin-Baylor is going to, right now, we're to be honest.
So to follow up on that, and that was my biggest, because I think that's the biggest opportunity for them is UMHB. And if UMHB is not interested, I'm assuming that they can choose, being a private university, to exclude Bird from their campus.
Yes.
Okay. All right.
Now you can still, again, like we talked about, you can own one of these scooters and ride them on the roads.
Yep.
And through public roadways, through their campus, whatever. But yes, specifically, you've seen that with just cities or universities like that will just not permit them on their campus grounds. And
okay.
Thank you, Steve. Appreciate your being with us.
Thank you.
Any other comments? There's no action required. You're just kind of getting a feel for general thoughts about scooters.
Yep, absolutely. Something for us to, at this point with the scooter companies and the conversations I've had, really scooter companies, they're incentivized to try and work with cities on the front end because they know, they want to bring 50 scooters here, and then we turn around and quickly insert an ordinance that says they can use that. Then all of a sudden that becomes, so they want to try to work some things out. So the feedback from Dr. Theodore, the feedback from you guys on seems like some general support for the idea, but there is safety concerns and possibly locations that we would want to be sure we protected and preserved for that. That'll give me at least something to kind of go back and begin those discussions with them all.
Hey, one more quick thing
Yes.
too. Seemed like in San Antonio they had bikes too, I think.
Yep.
But they also had some bigger scooters too that weren't quite. They were a little more user friendly.
Yep.
Like that one that fellow was on in the picture. I'm not getting on that. But, if you had one you could stand on normally, I think they had some wider ones, some different, maybe some more user friendly.
There's no shortage of them, available options. And so, yeah, and if you remember in San Antonio, they had people actively yelling at you to get off the sidewalk. They enforced that no sidewalks in their downtown areas, like tourism areas. And so they're yelling at, they've got the security officers out. So yeah, there's absolutely ways that we can work with companies. If there is interest on the front end about wanting to come, we can then explain where we stand on some of these issues. And that's your comments there tonight, and certainly stakeholders like UMHB, and then begin if there's a facilitation in that, for sure. So,
Chief Ellis, you got any thoughts on scooters with appropriateness for us?
All right, looking down, responded to Steve there. I think as a community, we're very open to being neighborly, and I like the idea of more people on the trail. The trails are safer with more people. Current state law does allow them on the roads, on roadways 35 miles per hour or less. So if somebody were just to bring some in, we would have to certainly address that. The law does allow you to ban them if they become a problem. Like Councilman Lee, the bikes and the docking stations, or even Dr. Theodore made a comment about the docking station.
Otherwise they end up, basically becoming a city problem, Parks Department, PD or whatever. So alternative forms of transportation, though, the police department fully supports. We're, as many of you know, we're proponent of being a golf cart friendly community.
We got to get some horses and some hitching posts and people can just hop on and.
You get the golden shovel.
Well, council, I appreciate your time. I think I got enough there.
One quick
Oh, yes, sir.
question. Don't I remember correctly that not too long ago that Mary Hardin Baylor, Steve, you might have some or not, that had bicycles?
The crew
That you
bikes.
could pick them up and use them and just drop them
We had
off.
a few that disappeared, didn't they?
We did.
Yeah, we did.
Well, up and
Do I
down.
need to address that?
Brought some back from NLC.
Okay.
Steve, do I remember that correctly?
Yeah, Dan, you do, and it's a, thank you for bringing up that bad memory.
That's what I'm good at.
In fact, I was joking with someone today. I was telling them I was coming to this meeting. That was actually my idea to bring those double bikes in, and it failed miserably. We brought in a number of bikes. I don't remember how many, probably in the neighborhood of 50 to 75. And the idea was similar to the scooter program. If you want a bike, if it's there, pick it up. You can ride it to your next class, get off. Hopefully you'll put it in a bike rack that we have. It just didn't turn out that way. They didn't take care of them. They rode them down the stairs. Not quite simple. They landed in our pond. It just didn't work out well. I'm not saying that the scooter program would be that way. But more.
Well, thank you, sir. Appreciate your input, and thank you, Matt. That is that concludes our regular session, so we will adjourn and we will re-adjourn and can we take about 2-minute break
Please.
before we have the executive session? So the regular meeting is now adjourned.